Welcome to the Wisdom of Show. I'm your host, Simon Bowen, and every week I'm speaking to the world's greatest leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs about complex issues and impactful leadership. Join us in the Renaissance of Wisdom. Well, welcome to this episode of The Wisdom of, where we interview people that have been successful in multiple areas of life and have wisdom to share, which generally means they've got some water under the bridge in terms of years of life as well, and have genuine insights to share, not tips, tricks, and hacks, but things that actually make a difference, fundamentals and principles. We live in an uncertain world, and whatever the circumstances might be, people often feel like we're in the midst of chaos. And the job of leaders is to help everyone else make sense of chaos. And my guest today is both a friend and obviously podcast guest, and that's Jeff Dudan, and interesting history, including being the undercover boss on I think series 7 of Undercover Boss. So we have to get into that because we need to know what the world of television's really like. But Jeff is the CEO of Homefront Brands and chairman of the Dudan Group, and has a long history in founding and running companies, particularly franchise, but also having been through acquisition, making a pivotal life decision to sell his company into a group, and then operating as the CEO. He's a Forbes contributor, speaker, and consultant of emerging brands, and is the author of Discernment, the Business Athlete's Regimen for a Great Life Through Better Decisions, which, when we spoke about setting this up, Jeff, and you and I have spoken before about, the lessons that come from elite performance and athletic pursuit and how that plays out in everything else. As I said, season 8 of Undercover Boss. But you also helped Florida recover from Hurricane Andrew, and that led to the launch of AdvantaClean in 1994. I'd love to start there, if you like, because it's, Hurricane Andrew, a hurricane that really decimates an area, is this starting point of conversations about hardship and getting through that. And you've had success at so many levels. You've also got one of the top 30 podcasts on Apple with the Homefront. So you've pushed in business success, in athletic pursuits, in media and things like that. I'd love to lean in on, what did you learn out of helping Florida recover from a hardship like that? I mean, I know it's a heavy topic to get straight into. We'll come to the important stuff like Undercover Boss in a minute, but what were the lessons that come out of, here's a really bad situation, we're going to do something, we're going to help, and then what did that lead to?
Simon, it's great to be on. From the first dinner we had together, sometime middle of last year or early last year, I've always enjoyed your mind and our conversations, and I'm better for it. So thanks for having me on. The most important thing we can ever learn is who we are, and what lights us up. And to use a Dan Sullivan, what's our unique ability? What do we care about? I mean, at the end of the day, when we get up every day and we get to do things that are so aligned with what we believe is important, those things come easy to us. And as you read my bio, I'm thinking, I'm exhausted. I'm like, oh, well, you must be exhausted from all of that. But the reality of it is, I feel like my life has just been like one carnival ride after another. I've had seasons that started as a college athlete, and then building a business in college, and then taking a flyer and traveling from the top of a mountain in Boone, North Carolina in a 4-cylinder pickup truck with a wooden ladder rack that we made down into the middle of a storm site where after Hurricane Andrew had just the first Category 5 that had ever landed in the United States, just the most damaging storm in U.S. history. And driving, when I came over the hill in Fort Lauderdale, and everything was fine. You come over this hill in Fort Lauderdale and every roof was gone.
Mm.
And everything was it was just like, it went from nothing. It went from fine to devastation. And we drove for 2 hours down 95 and ultimately down US 1 all the way through Homestead. And it was the same. It was massive. I mean, it was massive, widespread damage. So you talked about, it's chaos, right? And what I learned in that was, what I liked about myself is I like to walk into chaos and make order of it.
Mm.
I like to help. I like to make a difference. And that has kind of been the hallmark of building a great restoration and remediation and disaster response business, was this concept of readiness. So what I learned was, boy, this is a big industry. I also learned, which would come back later in my story, is that it was largely heavily franchised. And the Serve Pros and the Service Masters and the Paul Davises and the First General, all of those companies that were either franchises or dealerships, like they were the ones that were getting all the work. And so I put that in my memory bank. But I learned, I gained a lot of confidence because I didn't grow up a very confident person. I wasn't a great student. I ultimately didn't get serious until I landed in my third college, which the first two, was I didn't get a perfectly good 4-year degree in 5.5 years because I was valedictorian. But I gained confidence when I went to App State. I had a good football career. I had a good academic career. And then I showed up down in that hurricane and joined a company that was a collaboration of many companies. And I ended up as being maybe the number 3 guy what was I, a 24-year-old? Just because of the ability to execute in that environment and the ability to learn and the ability to talk a little bit and to sell a little bit. So that was what I learned, was that, what I learned is that if you're bold enough to take a chance, and if you're fearless enough to not focus on the risks or the opportunity cost, that you can really, really learn things, and you can gain confidence, you can gain capabilities, you can gain network and all of that. And honestly, since me taking that flyer, because I had a perfectly good business going in Boone, North Carolina, I was waiting on my wife at the time to graduate, college. She was a couple of years behind me. And I just said, I'll be back in 3 weeks. And I came back 3 years later, a changed man, a person that had traveled a lot, that had seen a lot, that had gained some skills, and had started the business that I would sell some 24 years and 11 months later with 240 locations in 37 states. And so that's what I learned. I actually learned that I had value, I had something to offer, and that if you were bold enough to take a chance and throw yourself into it and not quit, that you could make something of that opportunity.
I love that summary. All progress lives on the far side of chaos. And, to make progress, you must walk through chaos. And so, if innovation is the trailing edge of chaos, leadership is the leading edge of chaos. And the job of leaders is to lead everybody else into chaos with safety.
Yeah.
People won't willingly jump into chaos. Sometimes they're forced into it, a hurricane. But then they're looking for leaders to lead them through it and make sense of the chaos. And I've usually said, the level of the leader's courage is proportional to how safe people feel going into chaos. But I think you've raised 2 really, really interesting observations that actually put you in the same category as Hugh Jackman.
Wolverine?
Yeah, Wolverine, right? Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
all right, can I
that?
roll up my sleeves a little bit?
Yeah.
I can promise you, I am not in the same category as
Oh,
Hugh Jackman.
well, it's interesting. I saw an interview with him, and the interviewer was asking him about his career.
Yeah.
And why had he been so successful? And he said 2 things. Always be ready. So a state of readiness. Always be ready. He said, I'm always ready. When someone says, when Steven Spielberg rang him at 2 a.m. and said, do you want to host the Oscars? And He was ready. He was good to go. And then he said the second thing is have a go, which is kind of an Australian version of be bold, right? And so boldness and readiness aren't necessarily qualities we talk about in leaders that often, but maybe they are the qualities of courage, boldness and readiness. When you're bold and you're ready, you have the ability to be a bit courageous as you lead people into chaos. So, what an interesting set of lessons and a change of life that you could never have predicted. But boldness
No.
and readiness gave you the next 20 odd years. So let's go back to college, right? And you're a college athlete in football. What are the top 3 lessons you'd love every young person to get that they might not get if they don't actually play, high level sport? What are the top 3 lessons you think came out of your athletics career? And then we'll talk about why a college student decided to start a business as opposed to just get a job to earn the money.
Yeah. Well, I'll come up with one, but like if I want to put it, I'll put a little end cap on the conversation we had. My favorite definition of leadership. These two come from one of my great coaches and mentors, a guy named Dave Zierfoss. But my favorite definition of leadership is someone who can stand on nothing and create something.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's so much wrapped up in that. So first, it takes awareness to realize that there is a hole, something that needs to be filled. And then it takes vision to say, and here's how I think that this can be filled. And then it takes leadership to tie people into that, to create a dream that's big enough for others' dreams to fit inside of it. And then it takes communication. And, another thing he would say is some people get paid by the hour, some people get paid commission, but leaders and business builders get paid by the conversation. So once you're aware of something and then you can see a solution to it, now you've got to talk people into it. Leadership is manipulation with good intent. It's, I'm gonna get you to do something that's going to be good for you, good for us, good for the company, good for society, good for the community. And then your obligation as a leader, or your challenge, or maybe your task, is to calm the swirl. The universe does not conspire to make us wealthy. It doesn't conspire to make us wise. The universe has a way of expanding and running away from you. Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's constantly expanding. All the things that matter, anything left to itself will go from bad to worse or near to far. So you've got this. Okay, I see this niche. There's a lot of friction in it. Here's all the elements to it. But now you need to calm the swirl and create a sense of order inside of that. And if I had to put numbers to it, that was a statistic, and 67% of all statistics are made up, but 1% of people create the value by standing on nothing, creating something. The next 9% of people see the vision and they join into that pursuit, and they build and manage the value inside of that. And then the next 90% of people live in the swirl.
Yeah.
They live in it, they consume it, they do whatever. So, really, that 1% or 1 in a million, as Chris Collins said at our last Genius Network meeting, was, that one in 1,000 or 1 in a million of people that can actually see it for what it is, and then have the courage to build something into that void that exists. Yeah. So, I mean, that's and I think, like, just wandering in, to this disaster zone as 90, it was a date of loss. I wrote it on every insurance form, August 24th, 1992. That was the date that Hurricane Andrew hit. So I would have been 24 years old, and just to wander in there. And then I've got a business partner that when he was pitching AdvantaClean to franchise prospects, he would say, and then emerged from the rubble a man that created this business, AdvantaClean. But and I get it. I mean, it's symbolism, right? But I mean, that's kind of what it was. I wandered in there, a babe in the woods, and 3 years later, I walked out with a business model and a business and all of that. So on the athletic thing, be careful the questions you ask. You might not get that many with me. I might just, but I mean, look, what does athletics teach us? It teaches us to fail gracefully and to be good sports and to be characters about it. But the less you tolerate failure, probably the more competitive and better you're going to be. I mean, Michael Jordan wouldn't lose, backgammon, pool, golf, anything. He couldn't stand it. And he would, so, you have to decide for the opportunity you're in. But like on the athletic field, you need to avoid failure, but at times you're going to have to accept it.
Yeah.
So there's a whole thing around failure that's deep inside of that. I think preparation would be the second thing. I mean, we train, for the little bit of time that we actually get on the athletic field. You've worked for 12 months, eating 7,000 calories a day, showing up at the weight room at 6 a.m., getting treatments, doing strength, speed and conditioning training every single day, looking at film, just all of these, catching 1,000 passes in over a week or, whatever it is. And like, you're just preparing for that one moment in that game when your number is called sometime next fall. And you've got to have just a little bit, just enough strength to get off the line, just enough speed to get open, and just enough skill to catch it. So, I mean, it's crazy. It's like the moments that make up an athletic career are so few. I mean, I had some things in high school where we went deep in the playoffs, and I was just very fortunate at the end of those games to have the ball thrown my direction, and I made the plays. And those 3 or 4 plays that I made in that playoff run at the end of it, it defines how I feel about, my whole career there. If I would have dropped those balls, I might have forgotten it, but I probably wouldn't. So, yeah. And then, so I think it's, and then the rest of it is, failure, preparation. You asked me for 3. I think it's the sense of, doing things that are bigger than yourself. I coached over 30 seasons of my kids' sports. And, if you can get a group of players and men, women, boys, girls, children, to play for each other, to play fast, loose, and happy, to understand that, you have a job to do, and that if everybody does their job, then we are going to be successful. Like it is that sense of duty and obligation to do your job for the sake of the other people that are trying to do theirs. There's nothing better. I mean, people that haven't watched American football, it looks very confusing. When I watch American football, I mean, I see everything that's happening in the moment. I know where the ball's going. I mean, it's so funny. I was coaching a little game, and we were 55 yards away from the goal line, and we had a play called, and I saw the play, I saw the alignment, I saw the athletes, and I'm like, well, we're going to score. So I turned around before the ball was snapped, and I said, extra point, because to me, I just saw it. And of course, we ran the play and we scored a touchdown. And the parents came up to me. They said, you called extra point before the play. And I didn't realize it, but you see it so clearly. When that happens and you're part of that and everything works like it's supposed to, the feeling that you have for your other players is almost undescribable. The joy of camaraderie and accomplishment together. So those are the things that you get from team sports that maybe you don't get from the individual sports.
Yeah.
That, and I'm still connected with these people to this day. I mean, Facebook,
by the way, I watch a bit of American football, and it made no sense to me at all until I found a YouTube channel called Football for Dummies. And they explain what's happening. Now I feel like I have something of an understanding of the game. But there's a couple of things to unpack there. I know one of Australia's more successful team sport players and coaches at Olympic and World Championship level, one of our most successful. And he does a lot of conference speaking. And he said, the major difference between elite sport and business is in elite sport, we train much more than we play, and we put ourselves
Mm,
under much greater pressure in training. So the game becomes the easiest thing we do. And business is exactly the opposite. We play more than we train, and the game becomes the most difficult thing we do. And that's a really interesting insight. And then I also interviewed for this podcast Liz Ellis, who's a former captain of the Australian netball team, and one of our stellar international sports people. And she made this interesting comment about you form trust in your teammates by watching them training
mm.
and seeing how hard they train. Are they doing the work? And that's where you actually form the trust, not on the field during the game. Um, some of the experiences you had as you went into the recovery work for the hurricane put you into this business, but you came out of it 3 years later but scaled successfully. And I think scale is a conversation so many entrepreneurs want to have or are having. And you scaled, you had an exit, you're building brands through Homefront Brands. You're helping other franchisees. What are the and there was some remarkable growth in AdvantaClean. So where would you point a young business? Let's go back now to that 24-year-old who was 27 when you came out. You had this business, and you of today are having a conversation with that 27-year-old, and you're going to give him the best of your advice that you've learned from him at 27 and you today. What would you share with him?
Even though I wasn't a tremendous applied student, I was a voracious reader. You need to read. I mean, if you hear about, what's the knock on, well, what's not the knock on Bill Gates, but I mean, Bill Gates, and so I'm friends with somebody who's on their charitable foundation and works with Bill on a regular basis. I mean, he's got like a little handle bag, like a bag that you'd get like a freebie at, at a shoot, I don't know, whatever, full of books everywhere that he goes.
Yeah.
And, you hear people, CEOs saying, I read a book a week, or I get the Cliff Notes or whatever it is. So, to calm the swirl, you need to have a broad knowledge base, and you need to be constantly challenging what you think. We love patterns. Our will is an exhaustible resource. If you get stuck in your own limiting beliefs because you learned something and it worked once, and now you try to apply it everything into your entire life, that's going to be an impediment to scale. I do this thing with sigmoid curves when I train our franchise owners, and it's a sigmoid curve, looks like an S, and it has the it's kind of an evolutionary thing where you go down first, right? And then you go up. But what happens is at every inflection point in a business, you need to take everything in your business and put it out on the curb and only bring the things back in that are going to get you to the next level. People, processes, technologies. Sometimes, you've heard stories. People fire 80% of their customers and then they grow by 300% because they were spending all their time on people that weren't bringing value to their business. So how do you get the courage to make those difficult decisions and break things apart? Well, you need to have a broad knowledge base.
Yeah.
And so reading everything, learning everything, understanding current trends, getting insight into future trends, understanding foundationally the mechanics through things like Good to Great or Built to Last or any of these things. If you want, and that's around corporate building, right? But then you can go over to, if you want to learn about the same things about people, then you would read Lencioni, right?
Yeah.
If you'd want to read the same, if you want to learn the same things about marketing, you might read Chip and Dan Heath.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to know, like, who are the authors that are the thought leaders for these different things. And then you need to go deep if you want to learn about, John Maxwell, so you have to have your scale is, if you're going to make a decision with confidence, you have to have enough reference points to understand, that you're making educated guesses about the future of your current resources and your future opportunities. So that leads to the second thing is, well, how can you make a better educated resource? You need to have you need to you need to build your network and ask for help.
Yeah.
When you ask somebody for help that's been successful, they will just give it to you.
Yeah.
Generally, because they're, I mean, somebody helped them. If they're that successful, they understand that somebody has helped them before. So the second thing you need to do is, like, one of the reasons we didn't scale any faster than we did on the franchise model side is that we tried to figure it out all ourselves instead of going out into industry and learning the lay of the land and who was who, and then maybe even bringing into the business one or two of those people that had built the great brands before. I mean, I probably would have built a company 3 times as big in the same time.
Yeah.
But we were very, now, because we did it ourselves, we actually did a couple of innovative things that we were too stupid to fail. Nobody else did it that way, but we didn't know enough about the industry not to know that. And they ended up being huge competitive advantage for us. Like call center. We were one of the few franchises at the time that actually centralized call center. Companies were afraid to do it. Oh, if we drop a call, the franchisee is going to sue us. We let them do it. Well, we ended up answering, 250,000 inbound customer calls a year with 16 people. And if our franchise owners would have had to employ 400 people to do it. So think about the blue ocean savings there, and how much better our model was from not only, and then as technology blossomed, the data, our ability to, to manage disasters because we got all the calls. So centralizing just the inbound customer thing was not something franchise companies ever did, but we didn't know not to. So it's good and bad inside of that, but those are the couple of things that get in the way, is really, being very curious, and then asking for help, and then, like, knowing when to focus, knowing how to change your focus. So when things are going really, really well, your gaze can go farther out on the horizon. When friction happens, which might be a signal that you might need to have a crisis and reorganize, which business owners are ready. The reason small businesses stay small is because the business owners will not make the decisions to make the changes that are necessary.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this sales guy's not great, but he's okay, so we'll just keep him. This technology system's not great, but it's working okay, so we'll just keep it. All of these types of things. So they do marginally better, but they don't do exponentially better. So you've got to know, like, it's where you focus and what you do about it. And then I'm going to add a fourth thing. Nothing great happens until somebody speaks a bold and powerful future into existence. So, when one of my first employees in 1995, after I'd come back from the hurricane and started the business in Orlando, then we started our second location in Charlotte. For people there, I can't tell you what that's the difference between Orange and somewhere else. I don't know. But anyway, so when I came back and I ended up hiring this guy, and he said, "Hey, Jeff, I've been here for 6 months as a contractor. I'm only working for you. Maybe I should have a job." And I said, "Sit down, Ray. Let me tell you." And I spent the next 4 hours uninterrupted telling him exactly what we were going to do with the business. We were going to franchise it eventually. We were going to have 1,000 trucks on the road. I told him that we were going to have orange citrus smell coming out of our tailpipe, so that in people's driveways and at stoplights, that people would know that we were a fresh, clean company. And I didn't have the final name yet, but I was working on it. So, but in great detail, I described to him what I thought was going to take 5 years to do, but took 25 years to do. But every person that you meet, every customer, every referral partner, every employee, you need to have the story. You need to have a 30-second, a 3-minute, and a 15-minute origin story about who you are and then what you're doing, because people can't buy into something that that's unclear.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So to scale it, like, you have to create, you have to speak a bold and powerful future into existence, and then work regressively back from that, and then sell people into it. So, last thing I'll say, but Simon, every business has a dollars per. Okay. If you're a residential HVAC business, you're going to do X dollars per employee. You know, you're going to have this many technicians, this many helpers, this many dispatch, whatever. If you're a consulting business, you're going to have different dollars per. If you're an elite law firm, you're going to have different dollars per. The size of your business, simply put, is a direct factor of how many people that you can get pulling on the oars in the same direction to helping you build that vision that you have to cast with great specificity and great passion.
Yeah. It's, you know, our libraries are probably identical. You rattled off a whole bunch of authors whom I'm a big fan of. You know, dollars per comes out of Jim Collins' work and things like that. It's, you know, you talk about the swirl or the chaos, right? And, you know, I've had the great fortune to be able to, you know, go to Africa and watch the wildlife on the savannah and things like that. And the world is actually very ordered and organized at a macro level. Like the planet does take care of itself, and nature is quite an organized thing. But the swirl and the chaos is at the individual level. So that single animal trying to survive is confronted with chaos every day, and it's a different kind of chaos depending on whether they're the predator or the pursued, right? But chaos is at an individual level. The swirl is at an individual level. There's actually huge patterns and order at the macro level. And, you know, if you don't read and you don't listen and you don't ask, what you're actually missing is perspective on the macro level. And the macro level is what gives you context to be able to make decisions in the middle of the swirl, you know, in the middle of chaos. We are as good as the quality of our thinking and then our ability to influence people. They're the two big leadership systems, system for thinking and system for influence. So, you know, you're articulating exactly that in business. So, you know, we would say to anybody that's young, you know, reading is not a pastime. Reading is elite skill development, you know, and ask and listen. You talk about, I definitely want to get to Undercover Boss before we wrap up here, but at the, you know, one of the things you wrote is at the core of everything we do is the concept of human-based design. I'm placing franchisees squarely at the center, and the system is only as good as what happens within the four walls of the business. Can you elaborate a little bit on human-based design? That's kind of interesting language. And we've spoken about, you know, franchisees, but placing them at the center of the business, what does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, you know, that is I think it's a consulting concept. So one of my business partners and our chief operating officer and president of franchising, Michael O'Driscoll, who is from, is it Bristol? Is it, he's an Aussie. Right. Oh, there you go. Yeah. And so, you know, but the concept of human-centered design is like that franchise owner is the biggest variable in the business. Like, think about it. Everybody gets the same business model. Yeah. Everybody gets the same website. Everybody gets the same training. You know, why does this franchise owner do 600,000 a month and why does this one do 60? Well, it's because of their ability to do all of the scale things that we just talked about and to execute within that business model. People will build a business to their own level of incompetence. If you're comfortable with 4 people or 5 people and that's as far as you want to go, then your business is going to be like a factor of that. So everything we do has to be focused on how that franchise owner is going to, you know, take action or not take action, implement or not implement, you know, engage or not engage. And we have to make it as easy and scalable for them as possible. In doing that, part of it, you know, the incentive is like, how much money can they make? So if you look, you know, 90% of franchisors fail within 12 years. I mean, that's crazy. Yeah. Like there's a franchise that comes into business every day. Somebody has a business and they try to franchise it. And there's one that goes out of business every day, almost 2 a day now, actually closer to 600 a year are now coming into the industry. 90% of them are going to fail within 12 years. There's a perfect balance of everything. There's a perfect balance of fees. How much money do you need to leave in those stores so that they are incentivized to build big businesses? And what are the levers that you get so that they say this opportunity, like sometimes people quit a franchise because not that they can't do it, not that they're not making money, but it's not the easiest dollar they can make. So it's like, I'm doing this and I see it clearly now. And, but based on everybody's results and mine and my purview, this is all I can make. So, it's gotta have the perfect balance of fees. And there's a relation between how much money they make and the fees that they remit to the franchisor. And if the ratio is 1-to-1, unhappy. If they're 2-to-1, they'll tolerate it for a while. If they make 3-to-1, they're getting there. If they make 4-to-1 or 5-to-1, they're like, this is the greatest franchise system ever.
Yeah.
So you have to understand the psychology of how people are going to look at those things and the value that they get, and what's the affiliation benefit? How much revenue do they get as being part of our franchise system? How much do we help them with buying power? How much do they get to keep? So there's fees, but then there's also the who does what, right? Like, what can we automate? What can we do with one person that saves that same person in every franchise out there? And then how do we automate it and how do we deliver it and all of those types of things? So, but that's really, when you talk about what happens inside of the four walls and you talk about human-centered design, it's like, you can't, we need to be long-term greedy, not short-term greedy. It's like, well, we could make another, private equity or companies, hey, if we make this sandwich 8% smaller, we can make another 2% on the bottom line. And, next thing it used to be a Whopper, now it's Junior, right? And, there's more bun than burger. So, but like you see it, you see things, you see reverse inflation on products and positive inflation on pricing. And so, but we can't do that. We have to be very mindful of making sure that everything we do is focused on the franchise owners first and their long-term success in building businesses that are going to be outcome focused on their transactable businesses.
Yeah.
And they also have to be businesses that aren't jet airplanes, because most people will crash a jet airplane.
So, we talk about the balance between short and long-term goals, right? And as the principal leader of a large collective, where do you put most of your focus sort of as a percentage? You've had this journey through operational management of companies, and you're also now in the investment almost like a private equity space. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the hardest things for business owners to actually manage is the short and long-term goal focus. It's easy to forget the long-term goals and get consumed by the short term. Have you stumbled across any strategies that really help you to manage those short and long-term goal focus?
You have to understand what the opportunity looks like when it's built, with some plus or minus for macro conditions that are outside of your control, like multiples, interest rates. What are things that could really damage your business? What are things that could impede, either enhance or impact the value, permanently impair the value of what you're building? But I will tell you that generally, I guess like in tech or some other things, but generally in businesses like I'm talking about here at Homefront Brands, or a lot of businesses, like private equity doesn't do a good job at startups because they're trying to make money right away. And sometimes it just doesn't make sense. So, somebody has to be passionate about the vision enough to sacrifice short-term gain, because doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. These we have 250 families now. We were 20 2 years ago. We've added 200 and, over 200 families and operating in 700 territories just in a short time. That's ridiculous growth. Usually a brand's going to add 1 or 2 franchisees a month.
Yeah.
We're adding 10. So there are things that we've had to do that just weren't in any way covered by the, the fee, because everybody's starting up, and the royalty rate, X 6% times, zero is zero, so there's the revenue's not there to support what you're building, but that's where you have to understand what you're building, and you have to say, this is what they need. So I make decisions on what we invest is because if I believe strongly that it's what the franchise owners need to be successful over the long term, I will make it. If I had to go to an investment committee and they're going to be like, no, you're already under budget. And I'd be like, yeah, but this is what they need. And that's why a lot of those businesses fail, because they starve the businesses. You got a bunch of brand new startup franchisees. They don't have what they need. And ultimately they're going to get very tired of that. So, generally at this stage where we have operated, now we're kind of a mid-sized company, but where we operated, families and solopreneurs build these things. But once they're at scale, they're very difficult to rock. They're very difficult to damage. And then, that's where private equity can own them, and, they can only impair them so much. And the good ones will enhance them. They'll invest in the strategies. They'll do things that with their oftentimes great skills in their pocketbook that will be able to, grow the business. So, but they need to start at a business that already has scale.
Yeah. Well, you have the lived experience of the startup, right? So you understand the challenge of those first several years.
It's messy.
And clearly
very messy.
Yeah, clearly haven't, lost the lessons and the feelings that anyone that started a business actually, goes through. You wrote a book, Discernment, the Business Athlete's Regimen for a Great Life Through Better Decisions. If the title was just about better decisions, it'd be interesting. But the word discernment elevates the interest level a little bit. I think discernment is actually something that's lacking a lot of the time. And I'd like to lead us into a bit of a conversation about, some of the thinking behind that and this idea of discernment as a key to decision making. I'm not sure it's a skill that students come out of school with. I'm not sure it's a skill that young adults come out of university with. Is it something that we only acquire by being bruised a few times? I'd like to lead us into your thoughts around discernment and decision making, and some of the mechanisms involved in that.
Wisdom is cumulative if you choose for it to be. And discernment is, the application of it's, I look at it in terms of models of thought. It's the models method, right?
Yeah.
So what's a model of thought? A model of thought is I'm able to look at a present day situation, and I am very quickly able to identify characteristics. As an example, one of the first things I tell my kids when they meet somebody and they talk about doing business with them is you have to understand how they make their money. Are they a transactor, like a broker? Transactors don't build franchise systems because they want to make money on every deal. And you don't make money till you're 3 or 4 years in, at very best, maybe 5. So are you a builder where you're looking to be an equity builder in value? Are you a creator where you're looking to, you make your money by being creative? And so there's about 5 different types of ways people make their money. So when you look at a situation, I would try to assess who the people are, because then I know how they're likely to react and how they're likely, first capital call came up. The transactor is going to be pounding on the table and say, I'm not putting any money in, and when am I getting money out?
Yeah.
So that's an example of, so your discernment is basically models of thought around situations that you can bring in different models of thought and different pieces of wisdom that you've accumulated over a lifetime and apply them to a present day situation.
Yeah. It's interesting. Over a long career, both as an executive manager and then starting a consulting business and consulting to government and large industry for decades, started to realize the two most important systems in any business are the system for thinking and the system for influence. When we use the term system in business, people think fulfillment systems, sales systems, etc. But it's the system for thinking first. The business is a function of the quality of the thinking that sits behind it and the idea it's built on. And then the ability to influence choices people make to support you, buy from you, work hard for you, serve you, give you the license to operate, fund you, and so on. And, I started to realize that the visual models that we build are actually a system for thinking and influence, because models framing give the mind a frame of reference, right? And it gives you that macro view. So think that the swirl doesn't seem to be there because you've got this macro frame of reference, whether it's mental models, models of thinking, visual models to work through. Models allow you to hold a frame of reference. Yes. And operate inside that allows you to be more discerning. I hadn't actually made the connection to discernment until you just said it, but it's pretty fascinating. It's
think about this. One of the definitions of wisdom has something to do with your ability to hold two opposing arguments on the same topic in your mind at the same time.
Yeah.
I've never known anyone to do that better than Jordan Peterson. I mean, he will be talking and he will say, now on one hand, you could say this, la da 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 da. But on the other hand, alternatively, you might look at it like this. He is having, he doesn't need another person to have a debate. Yeah. He's so sharp, right? So now here's the thing. If we go back to something I said earlier, it's people that get stuck and apply a model of thought indiscriminately because they believe it's right to a situation. And the problem is it doesn't fit. It doesn't work. It's invalid. So not only do you need to develop these models of thought in the universe, you need to be able to combine them. There needs to be flexibility. You need to be objective and humble enough to say, this could be wrong. Do I phone a friend? How do I figure this out? But so the discernment, really it's and the way that I walked through the book was through using discernment filters.
Right.
So one of your filters is values. Your values, if you do a good job on your values and they're authentic to you, and then they're authentic to the company that you're building, your values can be used to break the ties. Like, who hasn't been in the business situation that went bad and it was 30% your fault, but it was 70% other people's fault, but it needs to be fixed? How do I advise a brand new business owner that's never owned a business before to walk through a process to make the best decision for both short-term and long-term in their business? Well, they have to start applying filters. So your values will break the ties. If one of your values is respect and you've got a upper level performing person, but they're disrespectful, they have a few drinks, they fire off bad emails, they get in, whatever, do you send them home to work because they don't get along with people, but you want the work product? Or do you find a different solution? If respect is one of your values and they're very, disrespectful, it might be that they're not right for you. Yeah. So, these, and by the way, your ability to make that decision ultimately will determine the velocity and scale of your business, because, anything left alone will go from bad to worse. So you've got to have the courage to, when you recognize something, to stop, sit in awareness and say, am I really seeing this for what it is? What's the impact of it? And then am I motivated enough to act on it? Yeah. And that's been my problem, is just, I'm an empath, right? So I'm too slow to fire. Yeah. And, I've learned better, but I've still wasted more money than anything, just, saying the right thing to the wrong people for too long.
Well, I had the opportunity to ask Richard Branson about that exact thing. How do you know when to say no or when to end something, whether that's a work relationship or actually a business or whatever? And he said, I can't say no. He said, we've lost more money because I didn't end things when I should have done.
Yeah, I can see that.
Than we've lost by starting things that we shouldn't have done, because I'm quite discerning on the start. I'm just not discerning on the end or the no. I love the idea of discernment filters. I love that as a takeaway. People could come off this episode and sit down in a quiet moment somewhere and, draft their list of discernment filters. What are their high level discernment filters? They would pass over almost every decision, and, or different types of decisions, and they'd be equipped much better than, where they're at right now to make better decisions. That one thing. What are your discernment filters?
Yeah.
We have to
too. Let me just say, while we're talking about it, like, they can use my book, and if they go to my Instagram, Jeff Dudan, and they can download a free copy of it. I mean, you don't even have to pay for it, so you can download a free copy of it and, see what my take on the discernment filters were.
Even better still. So people should do that. Go and grab the book, right? I love that idea, the discernment filters, and discernment as the decision-making tool rather than a process.
Look, here, let me just, think about a gas gauge. Life is about probabilities. Nothing is 100%. I mean, you think it's 100% we're going to finish this podcast? I could have a heart attack right now.
Yeah.
Right. And anything can go to zero.
Yeah.
So your success in achieving and doing the things that you have set out to do are simply a factor of the decisions that you make every day. And I want you to think about this in terms of body of work. Okay, I used to tell my kids I coach, you have 99 decisions to make every day, starting whether you get up and make your bed and you're respectful to your parents, you get out the door on time and get to school. There's 3 right there that you can make a difference, okay? Now, you get the rest of the day. Do you smile at this person? Do you give a compliment that was unsolicited? Do you, how do you execute your day? Every action that you take or inaction that you don't take, you can either put in an add column or a subtract column. At the end of the day, at the end of the week, and at the end of your life is just a thing. Did you do things that added to you or did you do things that subtracted? It's incredible, but like the discernment, like every little thing you do, it moves that needle on that gas gauge closer or farther away. And to what you want to do. So every decision matters. Like every little decision is, people think it was the big decisions, but the little decisions, it's like, if you want to save money on a house, you can either negotiate the air conditioner down $1,000 or you can negotiate a nickel a brick.
Yeah.
You'll save more money at a nickel a brick than you will on one big purchase. Right. So, and it's like, the quality of your decisions determines the quality of your life and the velocity of your business in pursuit of the worthy ideals that you care about.
Yeah. Consistency compounds.
Yes.
And people want the one big hit, but consistency compounds. And I'm the youngest of 4. The eldest is 5 years older than me. And, he's an M&A lawyer, a mergers and acquisition lawyer, and he sees the world through that lens. But, for years, he's said to me, you go through life either as a net contributor or a net consumer. And it's an interesting frame to view life through. So at the end of life, were you a net contributor or a net consumer?
That's in the book.
What was the balance?
It's in the book.
Get the book, people.
It's in the book. It's not in that way, but it's a balance sheet.
Yeah.
It's creation versus consumption. Your percentage of creation versus your percentage of consumption equals your fulfillment.
Yeah. Your percentage of creation versus your percentage of consumption equals fulfillment. That's a fascinating perspective.
Well, so I just made it up.
We're pushing against time, but I need to find out about the world of television and Undercover Boss episodes. That must have been an interesting experience, and we all consume that as television. I've seen the episode. You look the same to me, I've got to say, once you had the disguise on. But and if I remember, one of your employees picked it, I think at the time. But nonetheless, that must have been, we could have a whole conversation about, what is actually real in a TV production versus what's been edited and everything else. I'm sure everyone's aware of those sorts of things, but that must have been a fascinating experience to be able to move around your company in disguise and be able to observe it through a different lens other than, in a suit, going out and talking to folks with them knowing that you're like the big boss, as opposed to here's someone coming to find out a bit about what we do.
Yeah.
Did you discover anything that you didn't expect to discover about yourself, about the company, about business through that experience?
So first of all, I think part of my confidentiality has burned off, in terms of non-disclosure, but I'm not going to ruin it for him. But I will tell you that that show is so well done in the way that they manage the production that all of the interactions are absolutely real.
Mm.
And the way that they do it, I'd never do it being recorded. I'd do it over a glass of fine Pinot Noir, but
Well, I'm going to be seeing you in a few weeks.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's fascinating the way they do it. It's a massive production. You would never think that's what was going on. And every year they shut it down and they say they were canceling the show, and then they spin something else up, right, and they pull it off again. And I'm just, so I don't want to do anything that's going to, keep them from being successful in doing it. But yeah, look, as you go through it, they first of all, they like operating in franchising because, a franchisee could have a new employee.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't know who I am. So it's kind of easy to get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
I did get busted twice. And, they went to 60 of our locations they interviewed to try to find exactly the right kind of thing. They want drama. They want the opportunity to help. They look for certain things, and they look for all these different boxes that they want to check on the show. But at the end of the day, like I was, so in the book, you'll find out that I also share my family values, and it's, live fun, be humble, respect others, be a servant leader, fail fast and move forward, trust yourself to take chances, and always do more than is expected. Okay. That's our family values. Mm. And up on the wall, when I sat down in the bonus room, I sat the kids on the couch, and I said, and above that was always do more than is expected, like on the wall in big letters. And I said, look, we've been asked to do this. If I follow our values, like I have to do it because, trust yourself to take chances, always do more than is expected. Now, here's the problem. Nobody knows we're wealthy. Your school doesn't know. We don't act like that. I mean, we practiced football at my building. People didn't know I owned it. I mean, we just didn't do it that way. And this is going to change things for you because everyone's going to probably perceive now that you're wealthier than you are, right? So, the truth is never, if you Google somebody and it says net worth, it's never right. I mean, it's 2 million or 250 million, it depends on what website pops up. Yeah. So, but I said, look, people are going to look at you differently. People might be jealous. People, are going to wonder, whatever. And, but we went to our values and we said, we have to say yes. And if you get it, then you got to do it. And that's what we did. So, and then the experience itself. So and one of the reasons I was comfortable doing it is I knew that we had great franchise owners, that we had a consistency of values, that we had always honored, not that everything always went well, not that there wasn't conflict, not that we didn't, get sideways with the occasional one here and there, because that's just business, and business is full contact sport. Not everybody's great at it. And we weren't always great. So, but I knew that our franchise owners, by and large, were a family, and that we would find people generally doing the right things for the right reason. And for that, and so that was reinforced with me, and all the great things that were going out there, all the great owners, and to be able to, I started that business before I got married. I mean, with a sheet of notebook paper, like drawing lines on it to create the forms, in my in-laws' home before we got married, when I was staying there before we got married. I mean, it was paper, and then my wife did the truck design because she was in advertising, and she did the truck design of it. And to go out across the country and see thousands of vehicles that just were made up on your kitchen table, and all of that. I mean, it was powerful. And to see other people changing their lives, having success, using the same forms that I created on notebook paper just now, a little bit, they did evolve, but I mean, it was, I mean, and it's not like I didn't get out there in the field, but to get out there really behind the scenes,
Yeah.
when, and the owners knew I was there, but the employees didn't,
Yeah.
so, anyway, it was a great experience. I mean, and by the way, you don't get to see it. You sign off. First time we saw it, 7.1 million people saw it. We had a big party at a sports bar, and we had 200 people there, and all the kids that I coached and all their families and all the employees. And I'm like, I hope this show is, I knew it couldn't be bad, because they try to wear you out. They try to get you to say things. And I said, if I don't say it, they can't use it, because they will cut things from here and there and make it look, they'll cut something you said here and put it over here and make a scene right about it. But I'm like, if I don't say anything stupid, they can't play anything stupid. So that was I and they get you up early and they get you on camera for an hour asking questions. Then in the middle of the day, it's again. And at the end of the day, it's again. So they're trying to wear you out, right? Yeah. And they try to put you under stress. So maybe like they'll, give you nudges like, shouldn't you be, firing that person or something?
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
But it's a great show. They do an incredible job with it.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. That's you've also just lent into, advice for aspiring reality TV contestants. If you don't say it, they can't use it. If you're fearful of being painted as the villain, exercise.
Don't be a jerk.
Exercise some self-control, right?
Yeah.
And I'd love to finish off with 3 quick questions, quick responses, and then we'll bring it to a close. I am a sports fan. I played sport at a high level in my own youth. Is there a moment in sport, an iconic moment in sport for you that is one that you just always, often think about it? It's just lodged in your memory. And it can be from any sport, of course.
I grew up in Chicago, and Michael Jordan played a game in the playoffs against the Boston Celtics, and he was deathly ill with the flu.
Oh, I remember that game.
IVs, pale as he, just sick. And he went out there and put up 63 points on those guys.
Yeah.
And to me, that says, if I don't feel like doing something, get on with it, right? Just get on with it and show up big. And, you can die later, you can, there's nothing we do as entrepreneurs is generally fatal. And if we're saying, I don't feel like doing it, I don't feel good, man, like you need to look in the mirror and say, enough, man, get out there and give it your best, and you can crawl into your bed later or whatever it is.
I remember that game. The other part of that story is Scottie Pippen carrying him through the game. And there's that famous photo of Pippen almost carrying him off the court at the end. He was so exhausted. So, at your lowest, when you might be performing at your best, but physically at your lowest, you then also are reliant on the people around you.
Never let down the team. Let down the team.
Yeah. And Luke Longley is a Perth boy, my hometown. Right? So 3 rings with Jordan, pulled me to the Bulls as a fan. You rattled off a bunch of books, right? What if you're pointing a young business mind to a book and you said, read this one first? Read this.
I'll go with a recent one. Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell.
Right. Interesting.
Brilliant.
Yep.
Brilliant. I mean, when I coach people, how much do you need to make an hour to make $200,000? I need to make 100. Okay. What decisions would you make differently if you said, I have to make $500 an hour? Oh, well, I need to have other people doing things. I need to, that's a scale question, right? And then it's like, what if it was 1,000? What if it was $5,000 an hour? Think about the things you have to say no to if you can only make $5,000 an hour, or how much less you have to work.
Yeah.
But those are the questions. It's like your time is your time and love are the most precious resources that we have.
It's a great book. Dan's a good friend, and
are you serious?
Yeah, Dan's a very good friend of mine. I worked through a series of models with him to help him frame his thinking for the book. And so, and
Richard Branson, Dan Martell, Simon.
Yeah. So Dan's a good friend.
When can I hang out with you more?
Yeah. Things like the buyback loop and stuff like that are just really fundamental principles. I loved How the Mighty Fall from Jim Collins. And the one thing that sticks in my mind about that is, success born of hubris. But, the 5 stages of how great companies fall, if everyone kept that curve in their mind, they'd make more discerning decisions and they'd say no sooner. That curve should be a discernment filter. Where are we on these 5 stages? And it's just a fabulous piece of work.
I just brought that book back out. I took it on vacation. I didn't read it, but I got to get it.
Burn the curve, those 5 stages, because the last stage is death, which is not recoverable, and the high risk stage is this, success born of hubris. Hubris is a fabulous word for him to have used in there, You shared family values with us, and you've shared so many kind of deep filters. I love the concept that you raised of filters. Is there a personal philosophy that you hear yourself in your mind going back to constantly? Any single personal philosophy in life that you just keep going back to?
Yes. If you absolutely know what the right thing to do is, do that.
That's a great place to end. If you absolutely know what the right thing to do is, do that. Gee, Jeff, this has just been a delight. You and I know each other, full disclosure for listeners, but we always have the best conversations, and this has been rich in thinking for people, rich in wisdom. I hope young business people get benefit. It's our job to, share wisdom and then pass it on with no judgment. What they do with it, they do with it. And, for older business people, it's a chance to check in. But just in general, are you a net contributor or a net consumer? At the end of time, the end of life, what's your balance book going to look like? So, Jeff, thank you so much for giving us this time, generosity of wisdom and time. I really, really appreciate it. And I look forward to our next conversation.
It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you.